It's interesting also to consider that like what animates sugaring the like sugar baby, sugar daddy, and also what animates financial domination is the fact that people with money are turned on by that exchange.
Hello and welcome to Fuck Yeah, the podcast where we say fuck yeah to cultural investigations of kink. I am one of your hosts, Sarah Tom Chesson, and I want to give listeners a heads up that we really had a doozy of a recording this past week and all systems failed us. So the audio quality on this week's recording is not at the level that we would hope for it to be, particularly Robin's recording, because for whatever reason, our system did not pick up our microphones and instead picked up our camera mics. However, this week's guest is so spectacular, and she is truly a punk rock goddess. So I am hoping that you all will join us on this ride, even though it is a little rough around the edges. We will do our best to return to our microphones on our next recording, and apologies in advance. Here's this week's episode. How you doing, Robin?
I'm great. I am so happy to be here with you and Tina Horn.
Yes. We're going to kind of jump right into our conversation because we want every second that we can get with Tina. I realize I didn't prep your bio, so I'm going to wing it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Tina is the host of the very popular podcast, Why Are People Into That?, which became the fodder for an incredible new book called Why Are People Into That? A Cultural Investigation of Kink. Tina, okay, you describe yourself as an educatrix.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce it?
That's how I mean, it's a made-up word, so you can pronounce it however you want.
Yes, a sex educatrix. It rolls off my tongue, can't you tell? And we have had you on a past episode talking about consensual non-consent.
Yeah, and there's a whole last chapter on that in the book.
There is. And I love that in your education, I feel like you tackle topics that are really misunderstood. And I think it really sets you apart from a lot of kind of run-of-the-mill sex educators.
Oh, that's what I like to hear.
Yeah. And we had the great privilege of reading this book. Robin and I book clubbed it, and it's just fantastic.
It really is. I've already enjoyed knowing you and having you in my life so much. But then to read this and be like, wow, you are a fucking kink intellectual.
Yes.
And I'm very proud to know you and to be friends. Like, damn, I'm so proud when my friends made one of like read this. Like, you are a smarty kinky pants.
That's exactly what people said. That usually that's in my bio, but you didn't have it today, and that's fine.
Do you want to be a kinky smarty pants or a smart kinky pants?
That's a really great question. I mean, because I came to the world of writing and podcasting and media making and educatrixing from the sex industry. I think for a long time as a professional dominatrix and pornographer starting in the mid-aughts, the mid-2000s, my brand both in terms of what I wanted, but also how I took the reality of how I was perceived and bent it to my own benefit, was like, yeah, like put like sexy, but like pushes glasses up on nose, right? Or like here's I mean, how many photo shoots did I do where I'm like in lingerie and like looking through like a stack of pornos and books about like fiction and nonfiction and fetish art photography and porno comics and everything like from my own personal library, and like looking through it and being like, oh my goodness, like come hang out with me and we'll talk about all these books I've read. And now that I have infiltrated some publishing spaces, there's it is a little reverse, or so maybe not hierarchy, but more like an inversion, where I'm like the scandalous, hopefully subversive, like sexually explicit person within those more button up. I mean, those worlds aren't always buttoned up, but the sort of baseline of, I mean, and you can really just think about it in terms of like, uh, in terms of an author photo versus, I actually just got a poster for a Litquake event that I'm doing, the San Francisco Literary Festival. And yeah, like all of the other faces of all of the other authors that I am in this event with, that was curated by Litquake, they all have, you know, uh like author photos, and it's like their face, and mine is in your backyard. Yeah, so I'm like in the tub in Jimmy Choo's with like, you know, my unshaved armpits like thrown up behind my head, and it's Alex Kasha, the great photographer who specializes in uh you know, promotional photos for sex workers and boudoir photography and all of that. So, and it's very like hazy, dreamy, there's a lube on the lens of how I am perceived in the literary world, you could say.
Then you came out with this book,
Yeah.
and you're like, all right, bitches, I got some things to say. And I'm going to say them in a really engaging, innovative way. Like your chapter structure is it's got such a good hook.
Cool.
Like the way that you use pop culture understandings of these uh, forms of kink and DS dynamics is like each chapter exists as its own microcosm that could, I mean, obviously in totality is fantastic, but you could take them out of the context of the book and they stand on their own because you're using cultural reference as an endpoint for those who have no point of reference for kink at all,
Or think they don't.
or think they don't, but then also the aficionados.
Well, thank you. I'm a structure girly for sure. And it is, as we have mentioned, Virgo season, and I am a Virgo. So, but it's important to me as a writer and as someone who has devoted a great deal of time and invested a great deal in my education as a writer, that, you know, this book is crafted from the perspective of somebody who not only has the background in the sex industry and the experience that I have teaching, a lot of experiences and opportunities that you have given me, Sarah, but also that I came to this book ready to make sentences and ready to make essays and ready to make like something that uh, coheres and is, it, you know, it's the form and function and content and craft, and all of those things are important to me.
So can I just, before we get too deep, can we ask you what your fuck yeah is right now?
It's pools, baby. Well, yeah, I mean, bodies of water of all kinds. I really do feel like I fulfilled my intention this summer in Southern California to be in a lot of pools, Palm Springs, in yeah, on the west side, on the east side of LA, friends' pools, uh, parties at pool, like hotel pools. My I was just telling you guys, one of my oldest friends has sort of random access to this quite fancy country club that I spent my birthday at, and I just feel I've always loved swimming. And I also, by the way, have it's one of my main forms of exercise is swimming at community pools. And that was something I really got into when I lived in New York. And there are so many wonderful community pools in LA. A lot of them are heated, which is not something that we need right now. In one day it won't feel so immediate, this notorious heat wave in LA, but right now it's kind of all anybody can think or talk about. Yeah, and like a lot of them are salt water. I don't know. It's incredible what it will do for your mood and your sex drive and your ability to sleep and like all of the things that are good, just being able to cool your core temperature. And that it's a great way to be alone with your thoughts or to have no thoughts, just vibes. It's a great way to socialize. Yeah, and I mean, I think I'm quite well known for my love of hot tubs as well, but uh anyway, I could go on, but fuck yeah to pools now more than ever.
So, and yesterday was your birthday.
It was my 42nd birthday, which are you guys Douglas Adams fans? Are you Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans?
No.
Well, I highly recommend that you read all of Douglas Adams's books, and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series is all kill no filler. But the significance of some listeners, I'm sure, will know this, that the significance of the number 42, I will just briefly say, not to spoil anything, but about halfway through this series, there is these aliens have made this all powerful robot, and they ask the robot the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And the robot spends, uh, I don't, like thousands of years, I forget how long, like computing this answer, very relevant in our AI times, to contemplate the absurdity of the scenario. And then they sort of worship the computer, so there's this sort of sense of like everyone is like, okay, today is the day where we learn the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And everyone assembles, and the computer says, I've got it, I've got the answer. The answer is 42. And it's, I have this, don't panic is another reference to that series. So I have that tattoo, which is a helpful reminder. And yeah, so I always knew that 42 would feel like a significant age to be.
So now you're one day into it.
Yeah.
Everything's coming together.
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing that came together was taking a chance of posting about that on Instagram, and some very smart hoes did cash at me $42. So I'll have to do the math of how tons of people cash apping me $42, what it adds up to. But people, if you can hear the sound of my voice, my cash app is $showbiz 042. So that's where you can send me $42 for my 42nd birthday. And we're going to talk about cash fetishism, and that's your segue, and that's structure, baby.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Okay, I'm jumping in here because I know that there's something that Robin wants to talk about, but I am going to go into cash because one of the things I love about your book is that there were some chapters that I was like, I don't know. I don't think I'm that interested in that. I can't.
Let's explain the chapter, because I think you have this great structure where it's like you have each chapter is a different type of kink practice, and it's a specific practice, but the way you go into it helps, I think, the reader understand all of the practices that are similar to it. Like, for example, the spanking one, I think, gives people a very good understanding of what impact play is all about. A lot of specifics to spanking, but it's like a broad way of understanding. So then you don't necessarily need to go into like all the different types of impact play.
Mm-hmm. Cannibalism was a chapter that I was like, okay, I can do it. And it was absolutely fascinating. And I'm going to stay on cash for a minute, but I was like, how did you keep my attention for a whole cannibalism chapter? Because it's not really something that I'm all that excited about exploring until I read your chapter about it. And then I was like, this is baked into our culture in so many ways, even from childhood. And so y'all are going to need to go and read that chapter.
That's the thing about like all kink in general, is that it's all coming out of our culture. And like the cash one specifically you're talking about is a more recent one because of the way the culture has shifted in certain ways, and particularly around like internet usage and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, like fetishizing cash has a different meaning in our culture that is mostly cashless. But I think that I could spend a really long time talking to you about this chapter in general, because how much of our culture is contained and turned on its head in financial domination is so interesting. And so I'm going to read your wonderful sentences back to you.
Oh, cool.
And then I just want to kind of hear your thoughts on maybe just how all of this coalesced for you. Like if this has been something that you've been thinking about for a long time, or just as you were in this container of writing the book, if it suddenly was like, all of capitalism is contained in this fetish. Okay, so you say, under capitalism, we consider certain material goods and commercial services to be worthy of free market monetary exchange. Meanwhile, we undervalue labor associated with women, especially caregiving and domestic cleaning, as natural functions rather than a valuable and vital aspect of our economic ecosystem. Financial domination, which I will say really briefly, is essentially that the kink is the exchange of money on the surface for nothing.
Sure.
For the dom just existing in all of their fabulousness, typically femme fabulousness, and draining their submissives of their money. In the container of not actually necessarily draining them of all their money, although that could happen, but that in the exchange, that is
the fantasy. Yeah.
Financial domination exposes this lie, giving invisible labor a shape by pouring opaque pleasure all over it like liquid latex. This form of fetishism grants enormous value to female attention by manifesting a system where money can be exchanged for the mere possibility of that attention. At the same time, Findom exposes the patriarchal fear that men are only worthwhile as providers, not fully emotional members of their families, a pay piggy giving tribute. Later, a couple pages later, you say sometimes it feels like Findoms are fixing the world.
Yeah, the aspect around reparations, also like taking even like another step, like towards just what is owed to people in our society, what has been historically and currently taken, and taken for granted. And it's a way on an individual one-on-one basis to kind of make these kinds of reparations.
And I would say before reading this chapter, I would not have described financial domination in that way at all. I think this unearthed for me probably a little bit of judgment that I had around like I'm going to be over here in all of my beautiful power and I'm just going to accept your money. And I'm like, how dare from this like internal part of me that believes that my worth has to do with my labor, right?
Right. But also the idea, I love when you're talking about the sugar daddy, sugar baby situation and how it's very, very similar, except the power dynamic is what we're more used to. Like, oh, the sugar baby needs the money, right? And she's going to provide her time and attention to the daddy to get the money, right? Yeah. And so he's paying for that, but it's more like.
But he retains power.
He retains the power, but it's not that different of a situation with the financial domination. But that power dynamic is flipped, and it's like, why isn't it flipped in the sugar baby situation also? And it's just like this. It's the patriarchal, like deep-seated ideas around power and money and who has it.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I want to say about reparations is that something that was really meaningful to me about writing and producing this book was being able to, like, within this chapter, to give a platform to a lot of Black sex work writers and thinkers who made in have made reparations like an explicit part of their sex work. And then even in making the audiobook, I got to this chapter and I started reading this big long quote, probably the longest quote in the book, from Mistress Velvet, who was an amazing femdom who passed away a few years ago, but did this whole uh, video for this like live feed that is now archived on the website 7 Days of Domination, about reparations and Black femdoms, and which anybody can watch and listen to that whole thing now. They made it available for free on their site. And I got to that part and I started reading Velvet's words, and I was like, oh, this isn't right. But but the quote is from a video that has audio. And so I instantly was like, I'm going to ask the folks who have archived this for permission, official permission, to actually use that. And I asked the producers and my publisher if I could do that. And they said yes right away, which was a big relief, and it didn't end up being super complicated. So it's actually the only voice that you'll hear. Mistress Velvet's voice is the only voice that you will hear on my audiobook besides mine, even though like I quote tons of people and thinkers and books and movies and song lyrics, but Velvet's voice is actually like excerpted in the audiobook, and that was very important to me, especially since they're no longer with us. All of that being said, yeah, like, wait, I wanted to ask you, Sarah, how would you have described Findoming before reading the book?
I guess I would probably have avoided describing it if I could, because at least having some self-awareness that I sort of struggle, I think we talked about this in the consensual non-consent episode as well. Like the things that I struggle with, I'm like, oh, it's not really my place to talk about them, right? Because I have some stuff that isn't worked out around this. But I think probably I have made dismissive comments about practitioners of FinDom. Like, I don't understand this entitlement around here is my list of things that I want,
Mhm.
and I expect that someone is going to provide these for me. So I think I do think it is an empowered state to be a sex worker and to claim, I want this amount of money for the services that I provide.
Mhm.
And I think what I learned in your chapter is that the service in Findom is the fantasy
Mhm.
of worship,
Mhm.
ultimate giving, and the excitement lives in the chance that you might get some attention or even a little chiding. Both are exciting in that exchange. By putting your money or your gifting to the Dom, the kink there is that there is now possibility for an interaction. And I don't think I fully understood that before reading your chapter, that there is an exchange that's happening there.
An exchange, but I also think that what's crucial is that the exchange, it's a slippery fetish, because the minute that you start to say, this is the transaction, this is the labor, this is the value, this is what it costs, then the desire and the value there starts to be slippage around those things. And and that is part of what makes it exciting, I think, is that it is mysterious and elusive. But and so part of the terms that I wanted to put it into in the book is even just recognizing that, like, part of what is the part of the appeal is the audacity to on the part of the financial dominant to expect to get money. And even the example that I was just giving, I too, like you, would not have felt comfortable. I'm trying to think about, like, technology and when it existed, like when Cash App and Venmo started to become things that we could just so quickly say, hey, can you send this to me? And then the money has been wired. But definitely 10 years ago, I wouldn't have felt comfortable saying, it's my birthday, so people should send me money. Um, and why I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that, I'm not sure. But now, and I needed the money then just as much as I need it now.
Yeah.
And sometimes financial domination is about, I need this money. I guess that is also part of the difference with sugaring, is more like the person receiving the money is being transparent about the fact that they need it, whereas the fantasy of the financial dominant is like, you could give me money or not, whatever, like, if it's not going to be you, it's going to be somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and like, it tends to be more emphasis on, like, I'm worth luxury goods, like, you're supporting me, like, having luxurious things, whether that is a whether that's designer shoes or, like, leisure time.
Mhm.
Because, like, I don't need to work for a living, because you're like, you just go to work so that you can get paid so that you can support me doing whatever I want all the time. Like, but none of those, to your point, Robin, the thing that is interesting to me to contemplate, even after all the contemplation that I've done about this for the chapter of this book, is, and on the episode of the podcast that I did about Cash with Lorelei Lee, and other writing that I've done on this topic, because the elephant in the room is sex work, right? With all of this, uh, and it's controversial within sex work communities. Listeners may or may not know, like, whether or not financial domination, like, is actually sex work. Yeah, anyway, but to your point, Robin, it's interesting also to consider that, like, what animates sugaring the, like, sugar baby, sugar daddy, and also what animates financial domination is the fact that people with money are turned on by that exchange. And, like, some sex work clients are inherently turned on by the exchange, but not necessarily. And, like, the person who is getting paid, whether it's a sugar baby or a financial dominant, is somebody who has recognized how to play into the fantasy that turns on someone who is willing to part with their money, and then leveraging that fantasy to get them to part with their money.
Oh, I love that. Leveraging the fantasy to get them to part with their money.
But also, am I not describing sales? Like, am I not
Yeah.
describing, like, all, yeah, just like I blame capitalism? Like, all of this is essentially capitalism and survival. Like, that is what, and whether it's emotional labor or it's a good or a service, like, there are so many things that we leverage what people want in order to get them to part with their money. That's just what we do in society.
I would like to just point out, like, when I started reading this book, I was shocked at, I've never read a book in my life. No, I've never read a book in my life that is so similar to my life. It's things that I've thought about that I've never, you put it into a much better language than I think I would have been able to. But especially when you're talking about your experiences as a pro dom, I'm like, we have such similar. Okay, there's this part where you run into an ex, and you end up telling him that you are a pro dom, because he asks, "What are you up to?" And he says, "Huh, I always knew you'd get into that stuff." And that spins around in your head. I've had that experience so many times. Yeah, that makes sense. But also, I think there's a layer of judgment to it.
Of course.
But I think it's also like just a lack of understanding, but also the deep seated shame and stigma around sex work and kink or anything, quote unquote, not normal.
Yeah.
Is just, So, but it was so interesting going through this. The way you describe coming into being a Dom, your ideas around it, even, I mean, you can see, like, I'm like, can you not underline the whole book? I was like, and I have all these comments on the side, like, amazingly accurate. I never understood that issue either. I've seen how the topic of sexuality can incite panic, how my deep interest in sexuality could alienate even the people I had sex with. And I wrote next to it, especially the people I've had sex with.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's an interesting, it's such a hard relate. Reading this, I'm like, this explains a lot of, I think, the ease that I've had around you and how I've felt like we've been long-term friends, even though we haven't known each other that long. I'm like, oh my God, we had like kind of the same 20s. But and it's just really, and then it explains so much, like, literally and seriously, you've given me the best spankings I've ever received in my life. When you go into the spanking section, I was just like, Thank you for putting words to this, for voicing. It's so, and I have so many parts I want to read, so I'm hoping I'm picking the best one because we can't make this into 10 episodes. Okay, you say in the spanking section, spanking is often referred to as the gateway drug of BDSM, and with good reason. It's pretty simple to wrap your mind around about how to do it, even if it takes practice to do it well, and even if it takes nerve to get started. The story of spanking can be deeply psychological, the theater of punishment, healing, healing, catharsis, control. Just as often as a spanking can be grounded in exploring sensations, seesawing between good and bad feelings, it can be a crude grab between partners, a sign of teasing possession, a sign of teasing possession. It can be worshipful admiration, a consecrated caress. It can involve a Foucauldian melodrama of discipline. It can be about a deepening handprint, an undulation of flesh, a shudder, a squirming gasp, an endorphin rush, an intoxicating surrender. It can even simply be about having or being reduced to an eager ass across a warm lap. You even talk about like different ways to hold your hand and different ways to utilize it, and I'm just like, yes, like the nuance of it. It's like I just I don't know, it's really fascinating. I feel like half of my memoir is written in this book because
You're
I
welcome.
there's thank you, a lot of ways in which you describe things. It's so much more coherent than how it is in my head, but perfectly got to the point of it. So congratulations.
I would venture to guess that you've gotten that feedback from more people than just Robin. That this is really like putting into words things that they have experienced, maybe even not even thought about their kink, but experienced in like a bodily way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is my gift. I mean, I guess what I always say is that I I realized very young that I love the sound of my own voice, and I love the spotlight, and I love applause and attention. So I resolved to be as entertaining and useful as possible so that I could keep having that feeling that I love so much. My expertise is definitely in the theoretical, abstract, conceptual, ideological, or even political realms. I try to bring in science when I can. It is destigmatizing, and I think that it also can be a relief for people to know those things, but also I don't know, it's not separate from the conceptual for me. Like uh it like there's not a mind body split. Sometimes talking about the body in terms of an allegory, like when I do tarot readings, I will always talk about um like metaphors for like thinking with your dick, or trusting your gut, or like being like too like all up in your brain, or something like that, or even the heart, right? Like the is such like a abstract and metaphorical thing that feels love, and like it's it's like pumping blood through our body, but then also we know that when you have all you have to have is one heartbreak or heartache to know that you do actually feel it in your chest. It's not just what you are thinking about, right? So, um, I, it makes sense to me because sex is, I don't know. I mean, it's how we think and how we feel, and uh, it's not all about sex is not always all about the body for everyone, but it is for a lot of us. And even, you know, talking about technology and thinking about like sexual entertainment that happens without people touching because of communication technology that we have, um, or entertainment technology, recording technology that we have. Um, I don't know. I don't want to say that that the somatic experience is essential to sex, because if somebody prefers non-physical experiences for any reason, then that's cool, you do you. But like, I need that somatic shit for sure.
Yeah, do you think that, because, I find myself really not personally drawn to kinks that are heavily psychological.
Interesting.
Like, I find myself in my head enough. And actually, like, so much of the early years of my life were really oriented around like intellectual pursuit. Like that was very much where I was pushed and driven. And so bodily experiences, impact play, things that are very sensorial are the things that I find myself drawn to. And so I often kind of go, oh, I wonder what, like, not that I can't intellectualize why someone likes humiliation play, for instance, but I cannot put like, I can't empathize on any level. I'm like, no, thank you. Do you think that there's a good way for people, aside from just kind of trying a whole bunch of things and figuring it out, like, is there a way to sort of, is there a gauge where you can kind of know, like, I'm going to be more drawn to these sorts of things? I know for me, like, I just hear about certain things and I'm like, ugh, like I tense a little bit. I mean, and even like with both of you, I mean, with some of the things that I read in the book, with conversations that we've had about your experiences as a Dom, I'm like, I cannot imagine, what is the word, what's the phrase that you used in relationship to spanking, like having the nerve
Oh yeah.
to, really dive into that.
Well, something that I've been talking about lately is that a friend of mine has opened up her relationship for the first time in about a decade. And so she was like in a, happy monogamous relationship. She's still in that relationship. And is absolutely having the like time of her life with polyamory, and in particular like that bisexual polyamory of like, I want to have more experiences with like people of the gender that my like partner is not, she's like having the experience that like I was starting actually to get a little bit like cynical about, like, oh god, have we been teaching people that they should be polyamorous to like have more experiences, but then actually it's like all just a bunch of fucking drama and like like, does this thing like exist anymore? And I'm like, oh my god, like, this person I'm very close to is it does exist. So very happy for them. Including like their primary relationship, the like sex is better than ever, and there's like so much compersion happening, and it's very beautiful. And part of what is coming up in a lot of the conversations that we have been having is that she'll be like, my friend will be like, oh well, I'm not sure about having this experience because it doesn't, the thought of it doesn't turn me on, or I don't think I'm like attracted to this person, so I don't know if I'm gonna like have this experience with them. And I had never really contemplated the fact that like that doesn't really matter to me. Like, curiosity drives me so much, especially when it comes to sex, that, and this is a quality that made me, that came in very handy as a sex worker,
Yeah.
that I was like, I just want to have as many experiences as possible, and I'm not really stopping to ask myself like, does the and am I having like a proto turn on about it? Like, does anticipating this turn me on? Am I gonna do this because when I think about it, it turns me on and I want to jerk off to it, so I like should see what it's really like. I'm just like, no, like let's do it, and then like let's literally fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And also like I don't feel like if I want to have an experience, I'm not really asking that many questions about like whether or not I am attracted to the person that I'm doing it with. You know, and kink has helped me also to recognize the fact that if somebody is skilled at something, then that has at something, by something I mean a kink activity, that that has more bearing on whether or not I enjoy myself than whether or not if I like saw a picture of them, that I would, you know, swipe whatever to say that I wanted to sleep with them or play with them. And I have had experiences with people who are very skilled at activities that I really like or wanted to explore more, that I like wasn't attracted to. And then even after playing together, it's not that that then made me attracted to them per se, although that has happened too. It's more that just I am glad to have had the experience and would have that experience with them again. And like maybe it like turned me on, or maybe it just satisfied me. Part of that is just being a kinky pervert, I think, and being like, I am just as happy having had an interesting, sensational, in many senses of the word, experience as I am in being like, okay, it's time for sex, so I want to be like super horny in a particular way and like go through an like arousal and orgasm response cycle like in a particular way. Um so yeah.
I think this is interesting in relationship to the conversation we had about the Kink with friends.
No, I was just thinking of that, and that I'm just like far too precious with things.
I don't think you're not to anything at all, first of all. But I think it's an interesting like frame of mind around like um, why you're doing the kinky thing in the first place. Possibly is like a key component of it. It's like, is it, oh, I'm very attracted to this person and I think I would like them to spank me? Or is it like, I would really like to feel a great spanking? Oh, and this person's really good at spanking. You know, it's like a totally different dynamic that leads you down a different road.
Or even the third thing of, I am just curious about experiences. And that really came through, your curiosity really comes through the book. Yeah, it is very enlivening, the curiosity that you bring to everything. And it's very neutralizing around all of this fucking bullshit that people have around sexuality and kink and all of these things. Like, cannibalism became relatable to me.
Yes. I really do. I really do. I really do like to hear that. I mean, you know, something that is important, and I want to get back to kink with friends, but something that's so important to me about this book is that I really love the idea, and I have known from my career, as I think both of you have as well, that there is, and speaking of money, that there is money in explaining the basics to newbies. Uh, um, and maybe they're uh, newbies to a particular, you know, maybe they're newbies to non-monogamy, or they're newbies uh to sadomasochism, or maybe they're newbies to just like any kind of sexual experience at all. But and I love the idea of, yeah, like giving someone an enlivening experience, um where like my curiosity and their curiosity can like meet and create some sort of good energy. um but I also, especially at my age and at the point that I am in my personal and professional experience with being queer and being a pervert and being a slut and being a whore and all of the different things that I am, I am personally tired of feeling like uh, connoisseurs are. This is gonna end up as like a double or triple negative, but like I'm tired of connoisseurs not being catered to. By which I mean, a part of what I wanted to do with this book was provide something that would be enlivening to to people who are experienced, to people who are aficionados, to people who like don't need to have like what every letter of BDSM stands for like explained to them like every single time. And I've worked really hard to try to figure out how I can write something or teach a workshop or do an episode of a podcast that is both welcoming to the curious and also like has a lot to chew on for people who have maybe been doing this for as long as I have or longer, as is often the case.
So achieved,
Thank
because
you.
I definitely felt like you put certain things into words in ways that I hadn't thought about or that I was not able to put into words so concisely. But then at the same time, like I would definitely recommend this book to people that are like why feet? You know, and I mean like, why all of it? Here, read this, you know, because it's destigmatizing again in the way that everything is neutral. It is not, it's whether or not it excites you, but it's like when we talk about like the physiological responses and how there's, you know, the pain response is so similar to the pleasure response and how they interact. It's neutral, even though we've been taught like pain bad or humiliation bad, or you can't put yourself in this position or do these certain things because that's bad. But actually, all of it is just out there in the culture, and this is consensual playtime. That everything can be on the table, and it doesn't have to be this bad and good thing all the time.
I mean, I know it happens at least twice in the book, but maybe more than that, where it's like, oh, and by the way, this thing that totally caught fire in the culture, the issue is not the kink here. It's that this person was practicing this in a way that was not falling within the parameters of a kink container.
Right.
And like, this person's just an asshole. I want to ask you a question about kink with friends. But before I do, I want to also acknowledge the very loving call out that I got from a friend after listening to our episode about kink with friends when she sent me a photo of her and I doing a rope scene together. And she's like, oh, I don't do kink with friends, she says, which I loved very much. And I realized I was like, oh, that is interesting. Like I'm conflating two things, which is like intimate eroticism and kink.
Right.
And that those are sort of different. There's a distinction between those. And I think sometimes I project intimate eroticism onto kink because that's the way that I enjoy exploring it the most, or that's how I practice it the most. But they are actually distinct, and I have played with friends.
Sometimes it's nice to be able to do kinky things with people who you are not necessarily attracted to, but also that it's nice to be able to engage in kink with people who you're attracted to in a platonic way, right? Like who you're like, this person is really fucking cool and a babe. And so not necessarily like, oh, I like have like a major crush on this person and I'm like super turned on every time I see them, which is nice. But there are also like a lot of other people who you can like I think there's a reason that we have terms like friend crush, where it's like, I'm not trying to fuck you, but I am like really drawn to you and want to know more about what you have going on. So like, it is fun for that reason, and especially at a sex party, and there's a whole sex party uh, chapter of the book, um, to be able to say like, yeah, let's like let's do this thing together. Because the other thing that is nice about it is that it means that you can be erotically intimate with a friend without having to have a whole goddamn fucking conversation about like catching feelings, or and you can like, I find that I can like be more open with people if, when being open is not then seen as like an invitation to love, or like a sign, or an indication that the reason that we're doing this is because I like want to date you. Another thing that is really nice about this in terms of play parties is that if I get an opportunity, or if I volunteer to do like a tasting or a booth or run a station at a party where I am, for example, like giving spankings or doing impact, it's kind of like being the grill master at the barbecue, where there's like a term of engagement for talking to people. And so, I recommend this to people who have any kind of social anxiety, uh, or maybe like have a new friend group, and they like want a way to get to know people better or anything like that. Like, I always feel so much more present when I'm like, okay, um this is what I'm here to do. And then it is like a really great way to meet people, because sometimes you have a spark with someone.
And it grows intimacy with your friends. Like,
Yeah.
I feel closer to people usually after playing with them and stuff.
Well, this has been wonderful. I feel
Yeah.
closer to both of you after having done this. Tina, where can people, what do you have coming up? I know that the book is sold everywhere
It's all
except for like super right Christian bookstores or something.
Don't give them your money, especially if it turns them on. Uh, yeah, so tinahorn.net is my website. It's tinahorn.net, and I'm most active on Instagram, much to my own chagrin, but that's at tinahornsass. I am also on Twitter, or whatever it's called, at the same handle. And yeah, why are people into that? A Cultural Investigation of Kink is available in hardcover, ebook, and the aforementioned audiobook wherever books are sold. And yeah, if your local bookstore doesn't have it, let them know that you want it. That is always very helpful to me. And any author who is marginalized in any way, um, but also like topics that people might be like, oh, I don't know if people would be interested in this, so we're not going to order it, and then people never discover it, right? So if you order it, then people will get a chance to discover it. I also write science fiction and horror comic books, and my newest graphic novel is called Deprog. It's about a leather detective who investigates and rescues people from cults.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, and that is going to be
Yeah.
out in September 2024, and can be also pre-ordered, because it's a graphic novel. It's sort of same as the book market, so it can be um, ordered wherever books are sold as well. And yeah, I'm cooking up some educatrix stuff. I want to maybe do some intensives and try to figure out how to use technology in my favor, to maybe teach some classes. And I do have a coaching practice, so if people want to, I've gotten a few new clients lately, and it's really reminding me like how much I love that work. So if you want to find out more about that, you can do so at my website. And I think that is most of what I have going on. That's all. I would just do one thing if, late capitalism allowed it, but until then, I'll be in the pool.
Well, yes, we certainly hope that people will pick up the book. And I have to say, the sentences in this book would be really nice to have read to you.
Yeah.
When you did readings at your book launch, it was very satisfying. I was like, oh, I cannot wait to read this book.
Yeah, so if you've read the book or like taken it out from your local library, you could also buy the audiobook and have a whole new experience of having me read it to you.
Or you can have a nice FinDom experience and cash out $42.
Hash symbol showbiz 042. Yeah. I'm offering it all.
That's a big offering.
Yeah.
Offering for you to send me money.
I could say fuck yeah to that.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to Fiercely Independent Media. Fuck Yeah Podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by Robin Jennings and Sarah Tom Chesson, also known as my mom. Theme music by Suno AI. Your support means a lot. You can give to the show and receive perks at patreon.com/fuckyeahpod. You can also rate and review the show or share it with a friend. You can reach us at fyapod@gmail.com. Bye for now.